We're going to look now at Book 12 of Milton's Paradise Lost. After Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, Eve became despondent. She was very upset. She became actually suicidal. Adam said, wait a minute, there is hope. Your seed is going to crush the seed of the serpent. And we find the archangel Michael comes down and actually gives them biblical prophecy to offer that line of hope. And I want to cover something that's maybe a little difficult to understand about biblical prophecy, but I think if you can understand this section from Book 12, and it's lines 290 through 306 of Book 12, I think if you can understand this, it'll sort of crack open your understanding a little bit of where this text is going. You've got to remember, Milton is telling a story of what happened biblically, in the biblical past. He's telling a story of Adam and Eve. But as he's telling the story, though, he's taking on the persona and a character, and in this case he's going to use Michael, the archangel, to tell a future event. So Milton in his time already is aware of this from the biblical text, but he's sort of playing with this idea of prophecy. He's sort of showing us how Adam and Eve may have looked to the future and how they may have been told of prophetic events in the Bible. So if we look at lines 290 through 306, we can sort of understand the idea. We can see this setup of the Old Testament and the New Testament. And these are two very different things. The Old Testament is represented by law, and the New Testament is represented by faith. You've got to get that in order to understand the whole biblical context of this. He says this, this is the Archangel Michael. He says in line 290, law can discover sin but not remove. So law could actually point to a sin, is what he's saying. Is law can say, if you have a law, let's say speeding, thou shalt drive 55, there's a law. Law can point to sin. That law of driving 55 says, you're not in sin if you're going 55, but if you're going over 55, well, then that's a sin. So it can point to sin, it can discover sin, but it can't get rid of sin. So, and that's a very basic example. It says, so law can discover sin but not remove, save by those shadowy expiations weak, the blood of bulls and goats, they may conclude, and let's actually stop there. So he's saying that sin can't be removed except by a ceremony, the blood of bulls and goats. And what he's pointing to is the sacrifices in the tabernacle that Israel did. Every year Israel would offer sacrifices for sins, and essentially the sins would be pushed forward one year. And then the next year Israel would have to come back and offer again another sacrifice, bulls or goats. And that would roll the sins forward another year. So the sins just kept rolling forward year after year. And it said that that's a weak form of sacrifice for the sins. It says, though, that they may conclude, if you continue in the text, they may conclude some blood more precious must be paid for man. So these bulls and goats rolling the sins forward wasn't working. There had to be a more precious blood, a more precious ceremony had to occur. And Milton's, through the Archangel Michael, is saying just for unjust, that in such righteousness to them by faith imputed. So he's saying that there had to be someone who was just to pay the price for the unjust man, for what man had done, to fully remove sin. And those of you who are familiar with the Bible, you know that this is pointing to Jesus Christ. And it says that in such righteousness to them by faith imputed. So this just man is going to offer his life as a sacrifice for many. And it says, by faith in him, it says, to them by faith imputed. Righteousness to them by faith imputed. So if they have faith in him, they're now righteous. Their sin is gone because of their faith imputed. Imputed means credited. So righteousness is credited to them because of their faith. So it's sort of like getting a bill for something, and you say, wait a minute, I never bought this thing, and then the store issues you a credit and says, oh yeah, we're going to remove this from your record. You don't owe us that money. And that's sort of what's going on here, is that Jesus paid the price, and it's credited to our accounts for righteousness, is what the Archangel Michael is saying. And it says that because they have faith, they may find justification towards God. So now man is justified to God. God can't say, oh, you have sinned, because this righteousness has now been credited to their account. So the store can't come back. If I have my bill and the store said, oh, we made an error, we're going to credit it back. They can't come back and say, well, you owe us this money now, because no, it's been credited back to me. So he's talking about that, and he says that the law by ceremonies cannot appease. This is a few lines down. He says, the law by ceremonies cannot appease, nor man the moral part perform, and not performing cannot live. So essentially what he's talking about here is that ceremonies don't work. The law can never fully be fulfilled. And if you know anything of biblical history, or if you know of the laws of Moses, there are many laws in the book of Deuteronomy. And he's saying man can't live up to all of that. So he's saying that, the moral part, even the moral part, man cannot perform that part. So it says that the law appears imperfect. And then later in the text, this is about line 307 through 314, Milton mentions Moses and Jesus. And so he explains how Moses is going to come and bring the law, but then how Jesus is going to fulfill the law, and essentially that's what's going to pay the penalty for man. So that's where he's going with the rest of this text. Also in Book 12, Milton essentially sets up, he takes us through biblical history, he takes us through Christ, through the death, burial, and resurrection. He takes us through the end times. He talks about the false teachers. And he takes us to the point at the very end of the text, Adam and Eve are leaving. And this is about line 41. About 6:45, it says that as they're leaving the Garden of Eden, they're shedding some natural tears. They're leaving what's familiar to them, but the world is all new before, or was all before them. So the world is before them. They're leaving with hope. Remember, Eve was despondent. Eve was on the point of suicide. Now she has a hope. She realizes that she is going to be the mother of all the earth, and that through her, she is going to have, the Savior is going to be born, which is going to crush the serpent in the end. So that's Book 12 of Milton's Paradise Lost.